Why Mozart?
Why Mozart? I think I have my own ideas about that. Some of them are mine, some of them are what I learned from Tomatis, some of them I picked up from other people, but it seems that there is some kind of a consensus out there, which has been summarized by the universal Mozart. There is something universal about his music. Some people are going to say that the music of Mozart has this extraordinary balance of between very structured music, but very structured automatically sounds like stiff. No, Mozart has a playfulness, a spontaneity, which basically makes the structure play, if you want. That is the first part of Mozart. From a Tomatis perspective, Tomatis was talking about sounds which sound can have either an energizing value or can have a relaxing value. He was talking about the two concepts. Like, for example, when you put Paganini to people or military music, they are going to get all charged up, okay? But that's not going to be very relaxing. When you put some other music, it's Tomatis was always using Chopin. It is more relaxing, but it's going to put you in a state of, particularly if you are a tendency of being pour me, that's not going to help you to get out of that state. Yes. Which means that Tomatis is saying Mozart balances this relaxing effect and this energizing effect. It's interesting because in the French language, the word régulation is not applied, exists, but it's for another meaning that what we in North American and I know German are using, and particularly in the language of sensory integration, regulation of the nervous system, regulation, which is for me coming from a language which didn't have the word regulation. I see regulation as a balancing between the energizing, the relaxing. It's this state in between where you are thinking, awake, but you are calm at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Mozart does that. Mozart regulates, has a regulating value. Why all this? Well, why Mozart is so universal? I think it has to do with the fact that Mozart started playing music, composing at a very, very young age. And because he was so young, he had not neuroplasticity. He had not yet wired his brain to a specific language, the language of his country, which was German, which means his music, of course, has some German quality, but it also has others. I mean, Mozart was a kind of an universal traveler. He was one day in Italy, one day in England, one day in France, one day hated French, but he liked France. One day, he's not the only one.
Did he find it as difficult to learn, I wonder?
But he was at ease everywhere in Europe. His music goes beyond the beat, the rhythm of one specific language. It is perhaps the universal language of children, a language which is more fundamental, that we tend to lose perhaps when we become grown up, because we become very, very specialized in one way of using the brain, the French way, the American English way, the Spanish way, etc., etc. As we know, all these people, not only do they have a language, but they have a way of even saying things differently. Okay, Mozart is beyond all this. Mozart is pre-linguistic. Mozart music come before language is acquired. Mozart, and when I was saying before, Mozart is a good mother, he is at least a good transition between the mother's world and the world of language. And that is where Mozart has an edge, and particularly early Mozart, the early Mozart symphony, the early Mozart concerto. In fact, the violin concerto were written before he was 20 years old. Then he stopped, it's interesting, he stopped playing violin and composing for violin solo because violin was hurting his ears. It's interesting. Mozart become Mozart, the structure perhaps of early symphony of Mozart is simpler for children to process, and that is those that we are using the most. The later music of Mozart, the symphony number 40, 41, the later work is not as effective as the early work.
Okay.
There is more bounce and life and playfulness in the early music. My opinion also is that Mozart was using his own music as a therapy. Was using his own music, his, thinking. He was sick. He was not a very happy child when it comes to family dynamics, etc., etc. He was pushed around like a little, a little monkey, circus animal.
Okay.
And he was probably spending a lot of time in the cold of going from place to place. I mean, we didn't have planes at the time. We didn't have cars at the time. And he basically and started making those melodies and this music in his mind. And then as soon as he arrived to the inn, he started writing. And it was known that Mozart didn't spend a lot of time writing the music. It was all in his mind. It was his way of basically doing his listening training.
Yes, yeah.